They did not hurt you because you were weak. They hurt you because at some point you became strong enough to notice the pattern. You started seeing through the mask, the mixed signals, the quiet intentions hiding behind the words. A lot of people believe controlling people only target those who are fragile or easy to break. But the truth is often more complicated than that. Many times they are drawn to people who are aware, grounded, thoughtful, and emotionally strong. People who notice details, people who feel deeply, people who can sense when something does not fully add up. In the beginning, that strength can attract them, it can excite them, it can even make them feel like they have found something solid to attach themselves to. For a while, your calm energy, your depth, and your self-respect may feel powerful to them in a way they cannot explain. But stay with this, because this is where the shift begins. The moment they realize they cannot easily shape your emotions, your choices, or the way you see yourself, the whole dynamic starts to change. What first looked like admiration can slowly turn into pressure. What first felt like closeness can start becoming control. The goal is no longer connection. The goal becomes influence. It becomes getting back the power they feel slipping away. And this is why the pain can feel so sharp. It is not always about one cruel moment. It is about the growing tension that appears when someone who depends on control can no longer move you the way they once did. The more clearly you see, the more uncomfortable they may become. The more firmly you stand in your truth, the more the old pattern starts breaking. And when the pattern breaks, the reactions often get louder. This is important to understand. In many cases, it is not always some cold, carefully planned strategy. Often it is a mix of insecurity, emotional immaturity, fear, and a deep discomfort with losing importance in someone else's life. When their usual methods stop working, they may feel exposed. They may feel smaller than before. They may feel like they are no longer at the center of your world. And for some people, that feeling is hard to handle. So the reaction comes out in patterns. More pressure, more testing, more confusion. They may push harder against your limits. They may question your memory. They may twist your reactions. They may become more distant, then suddenly more intense. Not because you did something wrong, but because the structure they relied on is changing. And here's the part many people miss. They are not always searching for weakness. Sometimes they are pulled toward qualities they wish they had themselves: confidence, stability, a strong identity, emotional balance, independence. At first, being near that energy can feel good to them. It can feel steady. It can even feel inspiring. But over time, if they cannot control that energy, they may start to resent it. The same strength they once admired can begin to feel threatening. The same clarity they once moved toward can start to feel like exposure. This is when things often become confusing. At the beginning, there may be charm, attention, and intense emotional closeness. They may mirror your interests, your style, your values, even your emotional tone. It can feel like deep understanding. It can feel rare. It can feel real. But little by little, cracks begin to show. Words stop matching actions. Promises lose weight. Accountability disappears. Blame starts shifting. And once you begin responding with awareness instead of confusion, the whole rhythm changes again. Your clarity becomes something they cannot easily manage. When someone feels they are losing emotional control, they often do not say that directly. It comes out sideways. It comes out in reactions. Suddenly, your concerns are dismissed. Your memory is questioned. Your feelings are called too much, too sensitive, too dramatic, too unfair. You bring up something real, and somehow the focus turns back onto you. You try to describe what happened, and you leave the conversation feeling more confused than when it started. That is not a small thing. That repeated confusion has weight. It builds over time. And it often happens because your awareness is making the imbalance visible. Instead of feeling understood, they may feel challenged. Instead of feeling close, they may feel cornered. So they defend, they minimize, they reverse, they create emotional smoke, so the real issue becomes harder to see. And if you have lived through that, then you know how strange it feels. One moment there is warmth, the next moment there is cold distance. One moment there is praise, the next there is criticism. One moment you feel chosen, the next you feel like a problem. That kind of inconsistency can wear a person down. It can make you question your own reading of reality. It can make you think maybe you are overreacting, maybe you are the issue, maybe you just need to explain yourself better next time. But look closely. The issue is often not the single event. The issue is the cycle. It keeps repeating. Closeness, then distance. Approval, then blame. Charm, then pressure. And when that cycle repeats enough times, your nervous system starts living inside uncertainty. You stop responding only to what is said. You start reacting to the tension underneath it. And this matters more than people realize, because once you begin seeing the cycle instead of only the moment, the entire experience starts making more sense. One of the biggest triggers in these unhealthy dynamics is boundaries. A boundary is not cruelty. It is not punishment. It is not rejection. It is simply clarity. It is a calm line that says, this is what I accept and this is what I do not. In healthy relationships, boundaries create trust. They create safety, they create structure, they allow both people to stay honest without fear. But in unhealthy dynamics, boundaries often hit like a threat, even when spoken gently, even when explained with respect, even when they are completely reasonable. Why? Because the issue is not only the boundary itself. The issue is what the boundary takes away. It limits access. It limits emotional reach. It limits the ability to shape your time, your energy, your attention, or your reactions whenever they want. And when that access is reduced, the old imbalance stops working the same way. This is why even calm boundaries can be met with denial, silence, anger, guilt, blame, or sudden emotional withdrawal. Sometimes the reaction is loud, sometimes it is subtle, sometimes it comes as cold distance, sometimes it comes as wounded words designed to make you feel guilty for protecting yourself. But watch carefully. The conflict is often not really about what you asked for. It is about the fact that you asked at all. It is about the fact that you stepped out of automatic compliance and into self-respect. And for someone who is used to unrestricted influence, that shift can feel like defiance. This is where many people get trapped because they start thinking, maybe I said it wrong. Maybe I should have been softer. Maybe I should not have brought it up. But the deeper truth is that healthy people may not always like a boundary, yet they can still respect it. Unhealthy patterns often react to boundaries as if your self-respect is a personal attack. That reaction tells you more than the words ever will, and if this sounds familiar, keep listening because it goes deeper. As your life gets stronger, the pattern can become even easier to see. In a healthy connection, growth is welcome. Your success is shared, your peace is valued, your independence is not treated like betrayal. But in unstable dynamics, your progress can quietly create tension. The more confident you become, the more self-directed you become, the more emotionally steady you become, the more the balance begins to shift. And once that balance shifts, the old system starts losing power. That is when the subtle resistance may begin. The encouragement becomes thinner. The support feels delayed. The compliments sound flat. The criticism grows sharper. You may notice strange comments that seem small on the surface but leave a heavy feeling after they land. You may sense emotional distance right when you are doing well. You may feel less celebrated and more watched, not always openly, not always with obvious hostility. Sometimes it comes in quiet disapproval, low energy, or offhand remarks that slowly reduce your joy. And that can be deeply confusing because part of you expects love to expand with your growth, not shrink around it. But if the relationship was built partly on your dependence, your doubt, or your emotional availability being shaped and managed, then your growth changes everything. Your confidence becomes harder to guide. Your success becomes harder to center around them. Your independence becomes proof that you are no longer living inside the role the relationship quietly assigned to you. And here is where it gets even more revealing. Your progress is not wrong. Your peace is not selfish. Your strength is not the problem. The discomfort often comes because your growth changes a structure that once worked in their favor. And when that structure weakens, the response can look like criticism, withdrawal, mixed signals, or emotional pressure. Not because your life is wrong, but because your clarity changes the game. This is why confusion becomes such a large part of the experience. It is not only that hurtful things happen, it is that they happen in a pattern that keeps shifting shape. One day there is tenderness, the next day there is blame. One moment you feel deeply connected, the next you feel shut out. One conversation feels safe. The next one leaves you doubting your memory, your tone, your motives, even your sanity. That kind of inconsistency can slowly pull a person away from their own inner compass. You may begin to second-guess your feelings before you even express them. You may rehearse your words in your head. You may shrink your truth just to avoid another reaction. You may explain more, defend more, soften more, and still somehow end up feeling like the problem. That is emotional fatigue. That is what happens when one person keeps adapting to keep the peace while the other keeps resisting limits and reacting strongly to basic structure. Over time, the exhaustion can become normal. The confusion can become normal. The waiting can become normal. And that is why clarity matters so much. Not to attack, not to label, not to turn everything into a fight, but to simply tell the truth about what keeps happening. Because when you stop looking only at separate moments and start looking at the pattern, something powerful shifts inside you. You begin to understand that your reactions were not random. You were responding to unstable conditions. You were trying to make sense of something that kept changing shape in front of you. And once you understand that, shame starts losing its grip. You stop seeing yourself as too emotional or too sensitive, and you start seeing that your mind and body were trying to warn you. They were trying to tell you that something was off. They were trying to protect you, that awareness does not come from weakness. It comes from lived experience. It comes from reflection. It comes from finally slowing down enough to notice the cycle. A healthy relationship does not need fear to stay together. It does not need control to feel secure. It does not need one person constantly bending while the other resists all limits. Real connection is built on empathy, honesty, emotional safety, and respect for each other as separate people. There is room for disagreement without punishment. There is room for space without retaliation. There is room for growth without resentment. But when control sits at the center of the bond, everything starts feeling different. The relationship stops feeling like a safe place and starts feeling like a place where emotional power is always being tested. Affection may stop feeling steady and start feeling conditional. Warmth, attention, kindness, and closeness may appear strongly when things are moving in a direction that supports the other person's needs, image, or ego. In those moments, it can feel incredibly real. It can feel like love. It can feel like home. It can feel like maybe things are finally better. But then the moment disagreement appears, or a boundary is set, or your independence becomes more visible, the emotional climate changes fast. The same person who felt warm can suddenly become cold. The same person who felt close can feel unreachable. The same person who once praised you can start criticizing you in ways that seem strangely sharp. That contrast is what keeps many people emotionally tied to the cycle. The good moments feel meaningful, the bad moments feel shocking, and the mind keeps trying to solve the distance by chasing the return of the warmth. That push and pull can create a strong attachment built not only on love, but on hope, uncertainty, and the wish to get back to the version of the connection that once felt safe. But if safety disappears every time you become more honest, more clear, or more independent, then the issue is not just a bad day. It is the pattern underneath the closeness. In many of these situations, attention and validation become the emotional fuel that keeps the system running. When attention flows in the direction they want, everything may seem calm. But when that attention pulls back, even slightly, the reaction can grow stronger. That is when the behavior may become more intense or more confusing. There may be sudden withdrawal, unexpected criticism, strange emotional distance, a sharp change in tone that seems to come from nowhere. In the beginning, there may have been strong admiration, charm, fascination, and a feeling of being deeply understood. Sometimes there is mirroring. They reflect your interests, your language, your emotional style, your way of seeing the world. It feels intimate. It feels rare. It feels like someone truly gets you. But over time, those beautiful early moments can start colliding with something less stable. Promises become inconsistent. Actions stop matching words. Responsibility gets avoided. Important conversations go in circles, and as you become more aware, your responses naturally begin to change. You ask more questions. You notice contradictions faster. You stop accepting explanations that do not fully make sense. You begin trusting your own perception a little more than before. And in unhealthy patterns, that shift alone can create tension. Because once you are no longer fully available for confusion, the old methods lose force. They may dismiss your concerns. They may act as if you are misunderstanding obvious things. They may question your interpretation until your internal reality starts colliding with what you are being told. And if that continues long enough, it can feel destabilizing in a very deep way. But this is the key point. Not every intense reaction means the same thing. Not every hard moment comes from the same place. Still, when emotional control is central to the relationship, your increasing self-awareness often makes the imbalance harder to hide. The more grounded you become, the more visible the structure becomes. And once you see that structure, the confusion starts losing some of its power. That is why boundaries, growth, and self-trust often become turning points. A boundary says, I am here and I matter too. Growth says, I do not need to stay small to be loved. Self-trust says, I'm allowed to believe what I keep experiencing. These shifts seem simple, but inside unhealthy dynamics, they can change everything. A boundary limits emotional access. Growth reduces dependence. Self-trust weakens manipulation. And because of that, even your quiet changes can create a strong reaction. You may notice more guilt, more withdrawal, more blame, more pressure to return to old roles. But this is where your real strength begins to show. Real strength is not winning every argument. It is not proving every point. It is not forcing another person to finally admit what they did. Real strength is stepping out of patterns that keep harming your peace. It is protecting your mind when the environment keeps trying to make you doubt it. It is paying attention to how you feel over time instead of getting trapped inside single good moments that erase the larger truth, because that is what many people do. They focus on the best days and ignore the repeating cost. They cling to the tenderness and explain away the damage. They tell themselves the good side is the real side and the painful side is just stress, just timing, just miscommunication. But if the confusion keeps returning, if the pressure keeps returning, if the respect disappears whenever you become more clear, then the pattern deserves to be taken seriously. You do not need dramatic proof to trust repeated experience. You do not need permission to protect your emotional space. And you do not need to become colder to become clearer. In fact, clarity is often the beginning of peace. It is the moment you stop living only inside the reaction and start seeing the whole cycle from above. That view changes everything, quietly, deeply, permanently. There is also a powerful shift that happens when you stop taking every hurtful reaction as a final statement about your worth. This part matters, because once someone's behavior hits you often enough, it is easy to internalize it. Their criticism starts sounding like truth. Their distance starts feeling like proof that you failed. Their confusion starts becoming your confusion. But not everything pointed at you is truly about you. Sometimes it is coming from their own insecurity, their own emotional limits, their own inability to handle closeness without needing control. That understanding is not about excusing harmful behavior. It is about untangling yourself from it. It is about realizing that another person's instability does not have to become your identity. When you begin to see that, your emotional distance becomes healthier. You respond less to manipulation, less to guilt, less to emotional bait, less to the constant pressure to explain what you know in your bones. You stop trying so hard to earn stability from someone who has never offered it consistently. And this is where many people begin returning to themselves. Slowly, not all at once, but truly. You begin relying more on your own perception, more on your own emotional awareness, more on your own reality. Their approval no longer decides your value. Their moods no longer define your identity. Their silence no longer gets to rewrite your worth. And that kind of internal shift is not small. It is the beginning of freedom. Because real emotional freedom is not changing another person. It is not making them understand. It is not finally saying the perfect words that unlock empathy where empathy has not been shown. Real emotional freedom is no longer abandoning yourself inside unstable patterns. It is no longer shrinking your truth to stay connected. It is no longer confusing endurance with love. It is returning to your center, step by step, until your clarity becomes stronger than the noise around you. And once that starts happening, even if the outside world has not fully changed yet, something inside you already has. At a certain point, the biggest turning point is not external. It is internal. It is the moment you recognize the pattern instead of reacting to each moment as if it appeared from nowhere. You stop seeing isolated incidents. You start seeing a cycle. Closeness followed by distance. Praise followed by criticism. Intensity followed by doubt. Hope followed by emotional exhaustion. And once you see that cycle clearly, it becomes harder to get pulled back into the fog. That awareness does not come from weakness. It comes from learning. It comes from surviving enough confusion to finally understand its shape. It comes from reflection, pain, growth, and the quiet decision to believe your own experience. If any part of this feels familiar, then maybe the most important thing you can do is stop focusing only on the separate events and start watching the repeating pattern. Not to attack, not to obsess, not to assign labels to everything, but to understand your own emotional reality with more honesty. Because clarity lightens what confusion makes heavy. When you can name the cycle, you stop being trapped only inside it. You begin observing it. And that distance matters. That distance is where your nervous system starts calming down. That distance is where your thoughts become more organized. That distance is where self-respect begins growing again. So if you have been wondering why the hurt felt so deep, why the shifts felt so sharp, why the pressure seemed to rise the stronger and clearer you became, this may be part of the answer. Sometimes people react most strongly when they can no longer control the version of you that once stayed confused. And when you stop living for their approval, when you stop measuring yourself through their reactions, when you stop fighting to earn a stable love that never stays stable, your life begins coming back to you slowly, steadily, for real. And that is where healing starts. Not in changing them, in returning to yourself.